Hello, and welcome to episode 0 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Morley.
And I'm Ryan, and you're all probably wondering, who are these guys and what is this podcast all about?
Well, I think to really tell the story of how this all got started, we need to go back in time to about a year and a half ago when Ryan was making a documentary.
Yes, I was making a documentary for my master's thesis in media production about content creators and YouTube and how it all relates to the notions of digital storytelling. So when I was trying to find interesting candidates to interview for this documentary project, my very good friend Emile Berger, shout out to the bro.
Shout out to the bro.
He got me in contact with one of his good friends and classmates at McGill University in engineering named Morley Kert,
Hello.
And he has a YouTube channel that was devoted to craftsmanship and making all different types of diverse projects. And after watching Morley's documentary and seeing how he was able to interweave so many different elements of his life into his work and to his channel, I thought he would be an amazing candidate. And in that time, since we met, we filmed his segment of the documentary. It turned out great. I got my master's degree, so that it turned out well. And
yeah, I think we're coming up on essentially a year ago when we did the filming for the documentary, right?
Exactly. I have to look at my Instagram feed to see when we took that photo. But yes, it's been exactly just about a year ago, which is ironic, but also very fitting now that we're starting this new creative project
perfect
together.
Time to launch the podcast.
It's perfect timing. And basically, yeah, so like that's how we met after that while. We kept in contact in the weeks and months following the filming for that documentary segment. And we were very interested in discussing more about having a podcast and being able to share experiences of creative projects and creative endeavors and just creative adventures with other types of creators. And Morley and I were talking about this for a long time. And then we went to this conference where it kind of all came together. Do you want to talk a bit more about that, Morley?
Yeah. So, I mean, luckily, Ryan and I both were living in Toronto this fall. So that aligned very nicely. And we found this really cool conference on, what was it called? I Make a Living. On creative entrepreneurship, I think it was. And pretty sure on the car ride there, both of us were like, yeah, I've been thinking about making a podcast recently. And then we kind of nudged the other person. We're like, yeah, like maybe this would be a good thing to do together. By the time we arrived at the conference, we had the concept. And by the time I dropped Ryan back at his house afterwards, we had the name. So this idea definitely had legs, and I'm so excited that we're finally getting going on it. It's been a good amount of time in the making, but I think we gave it its due diligence to like really flesh out what this is.
And I agree with that totally. It's funny how like we just had this combustion of ideas for the podcast while we were stuck in traffic, staying stuck in traffic while going to that creative conference, which is kind of funny. But this podcast is called Into the Spotlight. And the reason it's called that is because we want to put a spotlight on anyone who has a creative passion or hobby or career and how they're able to do that, and just learn about how their experiences informs their work and how it also impacts how they view the world and how they want to like share their creativity with others around them. And the reason why I put Into the Spotlight, it called it Into the Spotlight, is just so like people can learn more about, interesting creative people that many people may not necessarily know about, or different types of creative activities that some people may not be totally aware of. But hopefully from this show, you'll be able to learn more about that.
Yeah, and full disclosure, Ryan and I, we're both young guys. We're both early on in our creative journeys.
Yes.
So, I'm really excited to learn from people in all stages of life and their process, and really have these conversations, and selfishly to figure out how to be a better creative myself. I'm really excited to have these great conversations.
And it's going to be fun. And this podcast is really, I was thinking about this last night, this podcast is for anyone who has a creative passion and enjoys discussions about creative topics and learning about the experiences of fellow creators and artists from a wide and diverse range of backgrounds. We want to bring together filmmakers, musicians, singers, painters, writers, poets, craftsmen, sculptors, actors, comedians, photographers, or any other type of creative person, and being able to share our experiences and our creative philosophies with one another. Whether your creativity is a passionate hobby or a professional career, we want to make sure that this podcast is for you.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Thank you. I didn't whip that up and think about that for 30 minutes last night.
All right, so since many of you probably don't know who we are or much about us, we thought a great way to kick off the podcast was to do a little interview session with each other. So Ryan and I, we both prepared some questions that we feel like will really get to the core of the other person's creative being and what motivates us, our passion. Yeah. So without further ado,
let's jump into
let's kick it off. All right, Ryan, I got a question for you.
Hit me with it.
All right. So for those who don't know Ryan, he works in a few creative mediums. He does photography. He makes videos. He's a documentarian, as we've seen. He's a writer. So with those very disparate kind of creative disciplines, Ryan, do you feel like there's one where you can express yourself best, or do you think each of them kind of allows you to express a different part of yourself?
That is a phenomenal question. I should have put more thought to preparing for my answer. No, it's a wonderful question. A lot of people ask me, like, how do you wear all these different sort of creative hats? And it depends. I don't know. Like, I have my certain... It depends on what I want to express, what idea or story or just theme or emotion I would like to express. Sometimes writing a short story or a poem could express that better, or sometimes a single image can express that. If I want to go maybe further in depth into an interesting subject or just phenomenon, sometimes video is like the perfect way for that. It really depends. But like, I have my own personal favorites. Like, I love like video and film, and that form of storytelling medium. That's the one that inspired me as a child, that I was able to, get my first camera at, 9, 10, 11 years old and make little short films. And from there, and from that time, writing was always my strongest suit. And I always loved writing short stories and poems, all from like, late elementary school, all the way through high school, all the way through college. But as I did, because I did my university education in communications, in media production, it exposed me to all different types of, new techniques and technologies and mediums like photography, which I never really put much thought of before. And it just allowed me to learn different ways of being able to express myself and stories that I want to tell in very different ways. So it's hard to say. Like, sometimes, like, I'm not an expert in everything, certainly not. I mean, I would feel very comfortable with writing a video, but I'm always learning new things. And that's what I love about this creative process and being able to go into these different areas, is being able to find new ways of self-expression. It's always fun. There's always something new, especially if you're presenting it in a new and different way. For example, if like I write an interesting short story and I come up with a unique idea of how to film it, then that's two different ways of expressing myself. And that's always so much fun. And I just love it. So to sum all of that up, it's just, how do I say it? Just give me a second. It's just being able to, I just love learning these new technologies, these new techniques. And I just love it because you're always in a different headspace when you're thinking of these things. They're always like driven by ideas, or just sometimes I see like an image or a sight on my commute, or if I'm just walking downtown somewhere, I see like an image and it just sticks with me. I always think about like, what could this mean, and what was the background from that? So being able to like write or do photographs or videos about that, it's always something different every time, and that's what always makes it so much more exciting to follow through on.
I mean, you're talking to a generalist. I know exactly what you're talking about, right? And since I have a YouTube channel and I do this leatherworking and woodworking and I film some of it and I don't film others, like I'm constantly like stimulated in different ways by different things. And like the video making process and choosing music that really kind of fits a vibe and a build process lets me express myself in a very different way from making something physical for someone. So I definitely feel like I need both of those to kind of fully express myself. And now I'm starting to discover writing as well as gets another part of me out there, and it's something I want to do a little more of.
That's fantastic. What are some like writing things you would like to pursue?
So, I mean, it's funny. Like, I think just actually writing so many YouTube descriptions, and I try to do pretty lengthy YouTube descriptions and tell the story, and like Instagram captions and things, just like a couple paragraphs to really like tell a story and sum up a project, or a commission or something. I really enjoy. And I started my channel Yell Round Blog as just that, as a blog. And I've been finding myself recently kind of wanting to go back to that. I'm working on a couple blog posts right now because I've been actually doing a lot of writing for a different purpose. I'm like, I kind of want to write something where its main way it's going to be consumed is by reading it, not as an accompaniment to a video. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. Like blog posts, I guess, like, because you can integrate pictures as well.
Yeah. And
I've never been like as into blogs as other kinds of media, but they are like, you can get a great story through like one long blog post. I find it's pretty immersive.
I agree with that totally, and you can go so much more into depth with those things, especially you with like as a maker, as a craftsman, you can go into so many more techniques and being able to explain and just say like why you pursue a project in this way or how you see it or how you make it in this way. And that relates to my first question that I have for you, is that you call yourself
killer segue.
We didn't plan this at all. Because you just call yourself a maker, correct? So
Correct.
Tell me, what is making and makers, and tell me a bit more about this sort of craftsman activity, specifically what it is and how you got started with it and the type of projects that you make in general.
So I don't think I would have called myself a maker until I kind of discovered the maker community online. I mean, ever since I was a young kid, I like to take stuff apart and maybe not put it back together and build like janky skateboard jumps and homemade fireworks and forts. I loved building forts with my cousin in the woods.
Who doesn't?
And if I look at my life like up to this point, that's like the biggest through line is just making stuff. And I think it's a big reason why I studied engineering at school. And I don't know what it was, just like at a certain point in university, I had one idea for a project and I finished it, I did it. And I think I felt very empowered by the engineering education. I felt like I had more tools to make something that wasn't so janky, to have a better design process and go from idea to reality in a confident way. And I was like, oh, I want to do more of this. And at the same time, I was getting into watching some other makers on YouTube. And I mean, I'm 23 years old. I really grew up with YouTube. So at a certain point, I was like, I want to contribute to this conversation, and found this amazing community of people who, from all sorts of different backgrounds, I think what kind of unites the maker community more so than like a specific craftsman is we like to do all sorts of different stuff. I think most people who are makers don't work in a single medium. Some of them do, and I think a lot of them predominantly work in one medium. But it's a very multidisciplinary group who, I don't know, I think the term is in a way it kind of sits in the current time it's in. Like a lot of artistic terms like romanticism, classicism, Beaux-Arts, you can't really take those terms outside of the historical context that we're in. I mean, and we're living in a time when you can live your whole life in middle class North America, never having to really build something with your hands. And I think in some ways the maker movement is like a rebellion against that. One of my good friends, Vincent Ferrari, who has his own podcast, Because We Make, shout out. He's made a really good connection where a lot of makers, at least ones that are posting online, seem to come from an IT background. So they're working all day behind a screen and they feel like they need to work with their hands, right? So I think it really is tied up in modern living. And a lot of people like want to have a connection to the things they have. I don't know. I think it's a very relatable feeling once you complete a project. It's incredibly rewarding and empowering. And another guy, good friend in the maker community, Andy Pugh, he has this great term, viewing the world as hackable, viewing like the world as you can change it, you can move stuff around, and it's a mindset in some ways. And I'm now forgetting your original question.
This is interesting. I like this anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's it. It's a really interesting movement more than anything. And I definitely feel like I can relate to a lot of people within the community. And I have some great friends, and a lot of my close friends from growing up aren't makers, but they're great friends regardless. And I feel like a lot of people who are makers access a part of my personality that I can't find outside of that community.
That's a good.
Yeah. I love it.
That's a great answer, and it's so true because like even though what I do is different, but there's always like a sense like if I'm outside, if I'm for like maybe 6, 7, 8 hours, I'm filming something or I'm taking photographs of something. There's always a sense of like accomplishment once you get to the end of it. Like this sense of this, there's a sense of hard work that even though it's hard work, there's something very desirable about achieving something in the end. It's this idea that
Mm-hmm.
like we can just take something, regardless of whatever tools that we have, and being able to use it to make something and express ourselves in a way that's really dynamic and just truly reflective of who we are as people.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have something physical in some sort at the end. Like if you're doing photography, you have those photos at the
Mm-hmm.
end. And we were talking about this recently where I was doing a photo shoot for a belt and you were like, "Oh, I love that framing that you did." And I was like, "Yeah, it was I can look through the camera roll and see the first picture I didn't really like, and then it's like looking backwards through it, I can see my mental progression where I finally found that final shot, which looked really nice. And it's kind of like watching a story of itself. Like I didn't know when I went out to take those pictures that final picture was what I was really looking for. It's a
It's a
cool
great, and
process.
yeah, that was such a great framing. I'm still going on about it. It's amazing. Gotta check out that video. Go check out Yale Arm Blog's YouTube channel. But it was amazing because like the way you framed that little sequence at the beginning of that video really, it was a great intro because it truly summed up everything about what that video was going to be about and just the style of it, and it just hooked me in to watch the rest of the video, and then I watched like seven or more, but that's beside the point. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. I'm gonna get a little less cerebral, a little more brass tacks. Actually, this is still pretty cerebral, but it has a more specific answer. What is a movie that affects you on a deep emotional level?
Mm. Do we have like 52 hours to go into that because it's gonna take a while?
No, you have to choose one. A movie,
A
not
movie,
the
okay.
movie.
Let me think about that. A movie. It's so hard because there's so many movies that have spoken to me at different times of my life. And there's a reason why my favorite movies are my favorite movies is because each of them, there's like a piece of them that have spoken to me at a very specific moment of my life where I kind of needed to hear the message that film was promoting. And for me, a film that I keep coming back to, if I have to put one up as a movie that truly affected me on a deep emotional level, that really helps inform what I do and what I want to do and what I want to pursue and what I want to achieve, that movie is La La Land. The
Mm.
groundbreaking and visually dazzling musical by the director Damien Chazelle, starring Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, is a really,
Never
you
heard
know,
of it. Just kidding.
it won Best Picture at the Oscars, and then it didn't.
Oh yeah.
I love that movie for so many reasons. It's either my top or in my top three favorite movies of all time, and I love that movie simply because of what it's about. Like if you remove all the set pieces and everything, it's a movie about following your dreams, being able to have faith in your creative abilities and your creative endeavors, and being able to just go for it, have have that love for something, whether it's music or acting or filmmaking or what any other activity that you have, and being able to just pursue that and being able to take in the pains, the success, the lows, the highs, and truly being able to appreciate the journey and just letting it take you wherever it needs to go. I love that movie because that came out. When did that come out? That came out around late
I think
2016. Around,
2018.
I think it was like around Christmas time. Yeah,
Oh, 2016.
around
Okay.
late 2016. And that came out a moment when I was like in my second year of university in my undergrad, and I was feeling kind of hopeless at that time. I was feeling kind of down. I was having a lot of self doubts about what I was doing. I was still like learning about all these new techniques and all these new different ways of being able to express myself through video and photo. And I was having a tough time with it because I felt like I was very inexperienced compared to a lot of my peers. I felt like a phony, like a fraud.
Little imposter syndrome.
Yeah, massively so. Man, I didn't really have any mentor figure, so to speak, to help me guide me on that. So I was just trying to figure it out. I was trying to I was just trying to make sense of it. Like, what am I doing? Is this worth it? Should I even continue pursuing this? And then when I sat down in that movie theater, because that's what I did in Montreal, I went to movies all the time, and I sat down, and when I saw it, it just made me go, oh, wow.
I also saw that movie in the theaters in Montreal.
Did you really? Which one did you see it at?
It was Cinema du Parc.
Okay, I think I saw this one at the Forum, the Montreal Forum. Cool. Yeah.
It's so like, I also really like La La Land, but I think I more like it aesthetically than the message itself.
But I love it too. I mean, like, it's really like a whole package,
Yeah.
But like, I understand on aesthetic level, just in terms of colors and visual, it's like, oh wow, it hits you in all the right ways. It calls back to that classical golden age of Hollywood, but also contextualize that in the reality of the times that we're in now.
Yeah. Like, it's one of those movies that's inspirational, because it's like when you see a modern piece of art and it makes you think like, oh, I didn't know that art could be like this. Like, La La Land is like, I've never thought this sort of movie could look like this in modern day, and like these actors would be doing this. It's also like, it is emotionally affecting. There's some pretty heavy moments, like with Emma Stone at the end, when she goes kind of into her aunt's.
She has that
reality.
little song that she sings, "Here's to the ones who dream."
I'm sure there's a lot of people yelling at their headphones right now, because I know that La La Land is a polarizing movie, and I know more than a few people who are not huge fans, but I think a lot of people who do like La La Land like really like it.
Yeah.
And it like really, they watched it at the right time in their lives.
Yeah, exactly. I think that can happen for any sort of movie. I mean, people, lose their minds, when the superhero movie or Star Wars movie comes out and it's not the way that they want it. That happens a lot. But like with the movie La La Land, like any movie or any art, there's always critiques, some valid, some are supported, but it's just, you always have to look at something as a whole. Like, I acknowledge, La La Land has some detractors, and sometimes they make points. I'm just like, yeah, but it doesn't make me love it any less.
Right. You can't control how much it affected you.
No, exactly, because it just hit me in so many ways. Like, there's a personal value that movie has for me. Like, I went to go see that like 3 or 4 times in the cinema when I was up, because it just spoke to me at the right time when I needed it, when something like that for that to hit me, and to just kind of be like, to just keep going and keep pursuing. And after I seen that, I was starting to make more video projects. I was getting better. I got into my master's in media production program here in Toronto at Ryerson, and then I started making this documentary. I met you through this, and it has led us to this podcast, our episode that we're recording right now. So it's always...
It's all due to La La Land.
Exactly, all because of La La Land. Thank you, La La Land. But it's true. But it's just like, being able to just keep pursuing your creative passions leads you to better things, and to some things you never expected. Like, I always wanted to do podcasts, but I never thought I was able to do this sort of podcast with someone as talented and as knowledgeable as you are. And so here we are. So it's always worth it. It is always, always worth it.
Yeah. And it's crazy too how just like, I feel like we've all had those experiences when one song or one movie or something like really gives you a kick in the pants. I mean, we could do a whole episode on this, but maybe we should move on to the next question.
Sure thing.
Okay.
So this goes back a little bit to what you're talking about before, kind of like to my first question that you asked me, in terms of like, how you're able to express yourself in all these new, different and dynamic ways. And since you started your YouTube channel, how has your style grown and changed over time? Like, what has changed in the way that you build your projects? But not only in terms of like how you build your projects, as you've built more and more different and unique different types of projects with different types of materials, but also in the sense that now you have this camera and you have to find a new creative way of being able to express that project, and how you're developing it in a way that is interesting, and how you're being able to communicate that to your audience. So how does that affect the way that you make your videos? Like, being able to have like that dual sense of like, how do I make this interesting project, and how do I film it and make it into this interesting video? How do you balance like those two areas?
I think one of the biggest things that changes is now I won't film every project. And I know some makers on YouTube who, if making on YouTube is their full-time thing, they will film every project. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like if I'm going to make a video about a project, I really want it to have a story. And I think I would argue that all the projects I have made do have a story in a certain extent. But maybe it's more sort of that I want the story to be strong enough that it's worth the effort it makes to make it a video, and then make the thing itself. That's not the biggest thing. I feel like there's so many little things that have changed. Whereas if you were to look at my first video versus the video now, you're like, this is so different for so many reasons. But I do feel like I kind of had a style from the beginning that hasn't really changed much. And my friend Pat told me, he's like, yeah, a lot of your videos feel like you're like in a cabin in the woods somewhere and it's really cold outside and you're like nice and warm inside. And I was like, I'm really glad that that's the effect that you get, because like one of the first maker videos I saw that really inspired me was exactly that. It was a guy blacksmithing a knife in a cabin in Scandinavia and making the leather sheath for it. And maybe I'll try to find that video and put it in the show notes, because that was very inspirational for me. So I feel like that has stayed a pretty consistent style. But I think I do put a lot more thought now into the video from the beginning. Like there's a lot more pre-planning. It's changing so rapidly though. Like I've only really been going pretty consistently at YouTube probably for a little over a year now. Like I was making videos 2 years ago, but I really feel like I was doing it more rigorously and consistently in the past year or so. I think my pacing has really changed. I mean, you do so much editing, right? And you get a feel for like, sometimes you're in an edit and you get tunnel vision and you're like, I just need to like get everything in there, but you don't realize until you do the final render. They're like, I just showed like 3 minutes of sanding. Like who wants to watch that? So you get a much better sense as you make videos and watch your own videos, of like what's interesting and what's gripping, and without sacrificing the creative expression, right? Because sometimes I do want to take my time, and that's been a really interesting point of growth for me. I feel like it's only in the last couple of months or so where I now feel confident where I can leave a bit of dead space at points where I might not have been comfortable doing that like 6 months ago, because I was a little insecure about losing people at a certain point in the video. But now I feel like I can do the intro, leave a second of blackness as the song syncs up to what I'm about to do, and create a vibe a little more intentionally.
Yeah, for sure. Those like cuts to black are a nice transition, especially with music that just leads into like the next scene or the next sort of segment of your videos. I think it's a good idea. And it's all a different sort of a creative process, being able to see what others are doing and like, oh, that's really cool. How can I use that and in my own context for my videos? That's really interesting about how the aesthetic, because I would say that too. It's like you're in a nice log cabin in like the world's most coziest place, and just, yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's a good aesthetic that you have for your videos.
And it was very natural because I was doing these first projects under my loft bed in an apartment in Montreal, largely at night. So it was very cozy. Anyone who knows me will know that I love coziness. I'm on a constant quest to make a space cozy and find cozy spots, find nooks everywhere. So I mean, I love it, and I'm glad that comes across.
That's a good quality to have.
Yeah, and even now, like I work on the floor. I'm working in a very small space, so it's always been kind of a core, natural part of what I do. So yeah, it's stayed a constant as other things have changed.
There's one thing I was wondering, because I noticed in some of your videos, sometimes there's a voiceover and sometimes there isn't, and you have like the most calming and soothing and harmonious music I've ever heard in a video. So like, why do you have some voiceovers in some videos and not in others?
I think in some videos I want to experiment with just showing it purely aesthetically,
like from a purely visual storytelling standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, and it's hard because people watch maker videos on YouTube for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of people watch them for inspiration or entertainment. Some people do watch them for more instruction and they want to know how to make something. So it's kind of tricky when you get comments on something where it's like, well, it's not really tricky. I mean, someone will tell you like, hey, like, what did you use for this? You didn't say it in the video. And I can go on after the fact and answer people's questions about how I did something if I didn't say it explicitly. But there's some videos I find especially if I've done a video with voiceover on how to make on my process on making a wallet, I don't really feel like the next video, if I do make another video on a wallet, that I need to do the voiceover in the same way. Um, but it's still a process. Like every video, some videos it's incredibly clear. If it has a lot of component parts and it's something that I'm doing for the first time, there's a ton of voiceover storytelling to be done, I feel, because there's so many things, so many decisions that I had to make and things that I can't really show on camera, but I feel like I need to explain. But the video I just put out on carving that belt, I mean, I could talk about each carving, but I feel like the main appeal with that video is like just seeing each carving come to life. And that's what I wanted to put across. I just wanted to visually show it and set it to music in a beautiful way. That's what I was trying to do. And I purposefully didn't show the rest of the belt making process. It was only about making these carvings. So, I mean, I think that's also a sign of me kind of like growing up in my video making. That was a very intentional video about that. Whereas I've made videos in past where I've shown the entire process on making something, but I still won't do voiceover. And maybe that doesn't come across as well because there's a lot to explain there. And I mean, sometimes it's also just like voiceover takes a lot of work. And I'm like, okay, I'll make it. I haven't really made a decision while I'm doing the edit, but I come to a certain point. I'm like, I feel like this can stand on its own without voiceover. Sometimes watching a maker video without voiceover is great. I'm not going to do it. So yeah, it's a process. I'm figuring it out.
It's always a process, and it's always just ways. Like it's funny, like even when I look back at some of my first projects, just to see how far I've come, it's just like, wow. Like sometimes it's a mixture of just like, I knew what I was doing then, to like oh my gosh, what was I doing then? It's always like in that little dynamic, in that polarizing range. But it's just things that we always have to do just to learn and grow, and it informs our creativity for our current projects and for future projects down the line.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna hit you with your last question.
Yes.
You ready?
Yeah, of course.
All right. When you think of great storytelling, what is the first thing that comes to mind? So a person, a classic work of art or fiction or nonfiction, a book, a movie, a director, a writer. What do you think of when you think of great storytelling?
What I think of great storytelling, it is almost always an idea or an emotion. Like we're going right to like the very, very origin of what storytelling is. It's always about expressing an experience that you've had, an experience that you may have seen, or just contextualizing events that you have imagined in your mind, but are also based on the emotional realities that you have lived through. To me, storytelling is always about that. It's always about the emotional and sometimes intellectual expression of those ideas and how we're just trying to make sense of the world around us. And it's interesting because I always wanted, growing up and going all through university, I always wanted to be that. I just wanted to be a storyteller. You know, I loved, videos and filmmaking. I love photography. I love writing. I love all these different ways of self-expression. But storytelling, to me, is truly about that very essence of the emotional truth behind it. And you see this in so many great works of like novels, memoirs, documentaries, fiction, feature films, even like albums, musicians' albums, poems. I mean, it just goes on and on. But those are like the tools and the forms of expression. And depending on the forms of expression, it's really up to personal taste. It's really about how you want to take that and express yourself in that. The way you make your videos is just, to use that as an example. Like I remember, like when I was looking up your channel for the first time, when the email suggested you for my documentary, I came across a video of a book casing that you were making for your girlfriend, and you at the end of that video you give it to her and you surprise her, and she opens up the gift and she sees it and she's like, "Oh, Morley," and I just thought, that's a story. So a little behind the scenes. She actually, at first,
she didn't think I had actually made the cover. She thought I'd bought the cover and then carved on top.
Oh, no way.
And then she realized after the fact that I also made the cover, and she was like, it was an even bigger reaction that we didn't catch on film.
That is so funny. So funny.
It's really interesting what you're saying about like great storytelling it's getting at the core of a single idea and experience. Yeah. And I told you we've been watching Ozark recently, and I thought Ozark is incredible storytelling. And I'm thinking of an episode we just watched. I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't watched it, but it's in season 3. And you kind of I had this realization in the episode. One thing that Ozark does incredibly well, I find, is they have a theme or 2 parallel events happening. And you're like, oh, these 2 sets of characters are kind of having the same experience, but in their own lives. You know, like it's the parallel stories essentially. And I just find those really, really cool. In one episode, Marty you kind of see something from Marty's childhood, and you eventually at the end, you come to this realization. You're like, oh, this is why Marty is the way he is. This is like, I never was able to put it in such a simple boiled down term before, but Marty is this. And I almost don't even want to say what it is because I think it is open to interpretation. And I also don't want to spoil the series.
But it's true. But that's why storytelling hooks us in. We just see something that sometimes we may not even experience but it's all things that we have seen in some way, shape, or form. And good storytelling is always about the relatability factor, to have that empathy for characters in a certain situation. And you see this all the time. You know, to me, one of the best shows ever is Mad Men. And being able to see all the nuances and the highs and the extreme lows that people go through, especially in this very specific historical context of the times. And just to go back to your original question about storytelling, it's just going back to the idea that it's always about the core idea that just starts in your mind. Storytelling is about having those ideas and how we obsess over them and how to express ourselves, whether that's through a photo or a painting or through a film or through a poem, any sort of way, is just being able to just understand these ideas about who we are in this very moment of time, and that's why they're timeless. You know, so many great stories are timeless. You know, why do we keep referencing Casablanca as one of the best movies ever? Because we're able to identify with it on so many deep levels. You know, right from
that scene when they're singing in the bar, and it's actually during World War II. And those actors are actually experiencing that is such an
exactly in 1940 when it was released. So yeah, they were at the very onset, or 1942, excuse me. So they were at the very onset. They were in that moment of time. You know, it's not like we can look back through it now with all the layers of analysis, but it's being able to see that in that very moment of time. That's just amazing. It's fantastic. So for me, storytelling is always about that great idea someone has, and just how they use the tools in the world around them to express it in whatever medium or shape or form that takes.
Yeah, and just to give one more example, I think that's one of the reasons why Wizard of Oz is so timeless, because it was such a groundbreaking movie, and when you watch it, you can so see the time it was made in. I mean, Judy Garland is like, you can see how young and naive she is. You can see all the handmade sets.
Yeah.
How practical everything was, all the practical effects, and it is so in its time that like it's such a capture of that
exactly
that it's weird. It's almost that like if the more that something reflects its time in a way, the more time
exactly
it is.
It reflects its time and
sense?
It's not even aware that it's reflecting its time. Like this is around the time of like the Great Depression, and the way it contrasts with like the black and white of the normal world in Kansas, and then we go to this colorful and mythical and magical world of Oz, and it's just a way for people to help understand the complexities that they were going through during the Great Depression and all those other tough times that people were experiencing. And even now we watch it, we're just like, oh, we just get it, even though we're so far removed from those times now. Thank you for that question. That was an amazing question.
Thank you. I'm glad it panned out.
I hope my answer is up to snuff.
For sure. I think that spawned a great conversation. So I think this is a good opportunity to move on to the next segment, which we're going to do every episode. Who do we want to put in the spotlight this week? So this is an opportunity for us to talk about someone or something that's inspired us, shine a little spotlight on them. So I'll go first. I alluded to him earlier in the episode. I have a good friend, Patrick Swanson, known him for about 7 years, and he's a musician. He's an artist. He took up painting this past year, and he's making some really cool paintings as well. I love him. He's a great guy. He's the sort of guy where we can meet and pick up right where we left off and have great conversations. And he also makes incredible music, a lot of which I've used in my videos. He's always great about letting me do that. And he has also been great about making the theme music for this podcast. So big shout out to the bro. I will put the links to his Bandcamp in the show notes. He's patrickgordonswanson.bandcamp.com. And he also has another project, reaching my hand out to touch the sun.bandcamp.com. He makes really cool stuff. Almost can't fit it into a genre because he tries all sorts of different things, but this guy knows how to make something that'll make you feel a way and you don't know why. And I love that. So check him out. And thanks again, Pat, for making the music. Did a great job.
Thank you so much, Pat. The music you made was wonderful. The first time Morley sent it to me, I thought, this is it. This is the intro. So thank you so much for all the work and effort you put into it. And we couldn't be more proud to have your music as part of the show.
Yes, and I've asked him to come on as a guest at some point. He's a little hesitant in coming on a podcast, but I'm hoping to twist his arm at some point and get him on. We'll see if that
I hope so,
happens.
because it's not it's just a conversation. It's not even really it's an interview, sure, but it's always about conversations that we're sharing between ourselves and learning from each other. So yes, I hope he comes on too, because he's a very interesting and talented individual, and I think a lot of aspiring musicians, other types of creators, will love to learn about his creative process.
For sure. All right, Pat. The gauntlet has been thrown.
All
right, Ryan, what do you got?
Okay.
Yeah.
So for this week, who I want to put a spotlight on, the very talented filmmaker and photographer Autumn the Wild. So Autumn the Wild is a filmmaker and photographer that has shot portrait photography and CD covers and album covers and all different types of photographic projects for celebrities, from Willie Nelson to Robert Pattinson, Kirsten Dunst, and all different types of musicians and actors. And she has also directed amazing music videos for bands and groups such as the Decemberists, Florence and the Machine, Elliott Smith, and so many, many others. But the reason I want to put a spotlight on her this week is specifically her first feature film, her directorial debut in the film this year that called Emma. It's an adaptation of the Jane Austen novel, and I saw this in theaters. That was when it was released in early March, before the world was shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And when I saw that, it was instantly one of my favorites that I've seen in quite a long time. When I saw this movie, it's just really, really well made. Her style from her photography experience shines throughout this movie. It's a great movie where it shows where style and substance work with one another, and they build off each other throughout the whole film. And so this film is based on the adaptation of that novel, and you see how she's able to highlight different types of characters and how they're able to come to conflict with one another, and how the main character, Emma Woodhouse, how she's able to try and matchmake with different types of characters, and how it all just comes together and falls apart. It's a really great film. It's a very sweet film. And this is a movie I think that deserves a lot more attention, especially with the way that the world is in crisis right now. I think, when I saw this movie, I had a big stupid smile on my face from beginning to end, and everything in it, from the acting to the cinematography to the music, especially the music, it's incredibly well done. So if you're stuck inside, which I imagine we're all still going to be for the next few months, please take the time to check this film out and just take a look at some of her music videos and some of her photographs, because she's a very talented individual, and I'm very excited to see what she does next.
I'm looking at her Instagram right now, and I'm assuming a lot of her recent posts are from Emma, and it reminds me of that YouTube channel, Every Frame a Painting, because I'm guessing these are frames from the movie, and it really does look like every frame in it is a painting.
She uses pastel colors extremely well, and it's very funny, and it's very sweet, and it's just very, it's just a very nice human story, and she has such a very distinct visual style that I think it plays off really well in this film.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm definitely gonna check that out.
So that's my spotlight for this episode.
All right. Well, I guess that does it for us. Thank you everyone for listening. We're super excited to bring you some great guests and great conversations. We got a bunch of people that we're hoping to get on, some confirmed. And yeah, I'm really excited that we're launching this. We have an Instagram account for the podcast at Into the Spotlight Podcast. You can find Ryan at rye.o'connor, OCONNOR, and you can find me at YellRonBlog. And if you want to see how to spell all those, you can check out the show notes. So get pumped. I think this is going to be really, really great. Ryan, do you have any last?
Just to follow up on that, no, this is a great show. I'm so excited for the potential of this show. I couldn't ask for a better co-host than you, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And for anyone, yes, please follow us at our accounts and Into the Spotlight Podcast. And if you guys, if you the listeners have any ideas, or if you'd like to reach out to us about any specific type of topics or for a collaboration, please feel free to get in contact or to reach us.
Yeah, DM either of us the podcast. That's it. That'll be great.
So thank you all for listening. We're really looking forward to the future of this podcast and this show, and for being able to interview and have great discussions about creativity, what it all means, and how we can all help each other with it.
Yes. All right, man. I'll see you next time.
See you next time. Take care.